Greetings, friends and fellow freelancers. Welcome back to another episode of Tabletop Mercenary. For folks who have noticed that we're back in an old angle and that my living space / studio is a little bit trashed and my voice is a little off, it's because I just finished up doing my last event of the year a little bit ago, and I'm still recovering. However, because I spent the weekend with a team of folks, with my partner, we were at a booth, we were doing our best to end the year on a high note, this is a topic that's come to me because I have heard time and again from well-meaning people, from friends and family, but also from folks on the internet who maybe don't have the same publishing experience that I have, that the idea for you to make money as an author, whether you're writing novels or whether you're writing RPG books, is to go to a convention and find all those people just eager to hand you their money. And that would be lovely. If you know of an event where that happens, please leave it in the comments below. I would desperately love to be a vendor there. However, the number of people who are successful at conventions are kind of like the number of people who are successful authors. You can probably name 2 or 3 of them, but it's not most people who are attending these events. Most people who attend these events do so at a loss. Some people do it at a major loss, and this is something you need to understand if you're planning on expanding what you're doing in the coming months, coming years, and you're going to be going to conventions to either show off your game or to try and sell your books or whatever it is you're doing. Make sure that you know what you're getting into and that you're going in with your eyes open. Because I have met folks who didn't, and they were in for a very rude awakening. So, let's begin at the beginning. Conventions are expensive, and the amount of expense you're going to pay is going to vary by show. Typically, the bigger show, the more expensive something is. That just goes without saying. But most folks don't know this, so I'm going to lay out. This is an if you give a mouse a cookie scenario. It looks like you're just doing one thing, when in reality there's cost after cost after cost after cost, and it nickel and dimes you until you realize that it will be impossible for you to actually make back what you spent on this show. So, let's start with some of those costs so folks can understand what I'm talking about here. First and foremost, if you're going to be a vendor, and this is mostly what I'm talking about here, there are other ways to make conventions pay, but if a vendor is when you show up and you're selling your product, whatever it is, you obviously have to go to the convention, you have to pay a table fee. The table fee is just the fee that you pay to be there in their dealer's room. You can put all your stuff up on your table, and that is your space. At smaller shows, well, at very small shows, you might actually have 0 to very little table fee, maybe $20. That's things for like very local fairs, library events, things like that. Those are meant to be interactive with the public, but you're not going to get a lot of people showing up. But hey, if you don't spend anything for your table and you don't sell anything, then you haven't lost any money, right? Technically, we'll get into that. But so at a mid-size to a larger size event, you're looking about $100 minimum. For some events like Gen Con, I've heard $400 to several $1,000s, depending on where your booth happens to be placed at the event. I have not vended at larger events. I've just talked to people who have, and that sounds like a nightmare. No, thank you. But so you have your table fee. Fine. Next expense, you need to actually get the stuff you're selling. And this is something that a lot of people don't appreciate, is that when you are an author or you are an RPG creator, or you are whatever sort of creator out there, you don't just get your stuff for free and then get to turn it around for 100% profit. If I were to, say, bring my novel Old Soldiers to a show, I have to go to my publisher because that one is traditionally published, and I have to ask them, hey, I would like to buy author copies with my author discount. The book normally goes for about $20. I can buy copies of it for $10 each. I get 50% cutoff. So when I resell that book at a show or just somewhere out in the street, if people find me and they just recognize me and want to buy a book for whatever reason, I can make that $10 profit. But I have to lay out the initial to actually get it. And so, that's $10 a book. That doesn't sound like too much. That sounds reasonable, especially if you can resell it for $20, right? That's fair. But if you're going to do an event where there are going to be thousands of people walking around, how many copies of that book do you bring? Do you have 5 copies? Do you think you can move that many? Do you have 10 copies? Do you have 50 copies? So what went from oh, that's not so bad, is now looking like a $500 or more outlay of cost just to get product. And if you have multiple titles like I do, as I have Old Soldiers, Painted Cats, Marked Territory, I have my independent novel Crier's Knife, I have my short story collection The Rejects, I have Army Men, which is significantly more expensive and as such doesn't sell as often. But you have to gauge how many of each book you want and how much money do you need to spend to have that product on hand for the show. The advantage of this is that books don't go bad. So if you don't sell all your books at the show, you can just bring those books to the next show. But it is still an expense you have to consider, because even if you sell 10, 20, 30 books, that money doesn't go directly into your pocket. You're basically trying to recoup the loss that you had from how much you spent on the convention. So those are two costs so far. You have the table and you have the cost of your product. Now you have the question of, where is this convention? Is it anywhere near you? Because if it's not close enough for you to drive there every day, or if it's more than a one-day event, now you have to ask about where are you going to be staying. Because if it's in your town and you can drive there from your house, that's fine. You're just out gas costs, whatever those are. But if it's a few towns over, a few hours away, now you have to get a hotel room or you have to find someone to stay with. And as we all know, hotel can get really expensive. And while there might be a special price for vendors, there might be a special hotel block you can reserve, you're still looking at a few $100s just for a decent weekend convention. Way more than that if this convention happens to be in a major city or if it's in a very expensive hotel. So let's say, just ballpark from what I've seen from smaller conventions, you're looking at another $300 and maybe $400 for hotel stay. Okay, that's a thing you can do. And again, there are ways that you can bring that down. You can bring friends with you. You can all split the room cost. But if you're just doing this by yourself, which a lot of folks do, we'll say ballpark $350 for weekend at a hotel. Especially if you want one that's attached to the event, which is very important. As a vendor, do that whenever possible. Make sure that the hotel you're staying at does not then have another drive you have to do in order to get where you're going. But, so those are three costs. The mouse has eaten several cookies at this point. But what else do you have to worry about? Well, you're not at home. What do you do for food? Does the event provide food? Do you have to get your own food? Are you allowed to leave the convention center or wherever the place is being hosted? Or do you have to have food delivered to you? Do you have to go out to a food truck, which is going to be far more expensive than what you would have at home? And if the event is multiple days, that's 2 to 3 meals a day. Now you're racking up even more costs because, you have to eat out all the time unless you brought food with you. And if you did bring food with you, how much did that cost? What are you doing to keep it cold? How are you managing to make sure it doesn't go bad so you then have to just go out anyway? And these costs just keep racking up. Because if I was just told, hey, you have to make $100 this weekend at a show, that's not too many sales. That's maybe a handful of books to move. That is totally possible for me to manage to do. However, if I'm only making $10 a book, $20 a book, $30 a book if I'm selling copies of Army Men, how many copies of those do I have to move before I have to clear the $300 to the hotel? We'll be generous and say another $300 that I put out to get the initial stock of books. How much of that profit do I get to keep after I replenish the stock so that I have enough books for the next show? How much goes into my gas prices, my tolls for the road, the food I ate? The costs keep racking up. And I have talked to people that are, they're folks who just do this all the time. This is their job. They just go con to con selling everything. And there's only a handful of them that I know, and I've been doing conventions for over 10 years now. Most people who do conventions, they write it off as a loss. Because, fortunately, if this is your job, all of those costs that I'm talking about, as long as you can afford them, they are tax deductible. So if you went to your hotel, that cost, you can write that off. That's a business expense. If you had a certain amount of mileage, that's a business expense. If you had to go out and eat while you were somewhere, go out and eat with clients. If you had to get new clothes, new stuff for your booth, All of that is tax deductible. But it is not a thing most people can afford to just lay out front and still pay the rent next month. I have met several people who have thrown all in. They spent their rent money trying to get this show, trying to get this table, trying to get all their booth decorations, trying to get their costuming, trying to get to the place, rent the hotel, get all their books, showing up, and then at the end of the event, they've sold 4 or 5 books, and now they are in serious trouble. And this is something that I very much need people to understand of. It is possible for you to go to an event and for people to decide whatever it is you're selling, whether it's your novel, whether it's your RPG, whether it's a cool piece of art that you have prints of, whatever it is you're selling, that's what everybody wants this particular show. Everyone is going to grab that thing. It's amazing. They are throwing money at you, hand over fist. You cannot take orders fast enough. That typically does not happen, though. Typically, what you're going to see is people are going to walk by, look at what you're offering, nod, and move on. Maybe you can engage them in a little bit of light conversation. Maybe you can try to make a sales pitch for what you've got. But it's rough. Even if you manage to go to a convention where people are specifically looking for the thing you're selling, whether you're a romance author at a romance convention, whether you're a game creator at a gaming show like GameholeCon, Gen Con, etc., etc., there's only so much you can do, and you never know what it is people are going to buy. Excuse me. So why do we do this? If conventions are not profitable, if they're exhausting, if they have so much logistics involved, and if you're spending all your time and energy and effort and you're not even getting to have fun because you're essentially just working shifts at a retail job and doing your best to make bank, why do we do them? Well, there's a couple of reasons, and these are just as important to understand if you plan on getting into this and you want to do these events in the future. Firstly, like I said, it is possible that you could make that money, you could find that audience, you could make those sales. And that could does a lot of heavy lifting for a lot of people. It's the same reason a lot of folks play the lottery, of maybe they've only got a couple of bucks left, but they'll throw it onto a ticket and let it ride, see if luck is with me. Because it's possible, hey, you spent $5, well, now you have $1,000 in your pocket. Awesome. But aside from that, if you're looking at just raw numbers and raw probability, what do you get out of doing a show when it's very unlikely you're going to sell enough copies of whatever you brought just to make back the cost of doing it? Because these events don't happen in a vacuum. They allow you to put your stuff in front of people who might not normally see you. People you'll never find on social media, people you would never otherwise meet in person. They'll be here at these events, and they will see you. And if people start seeing you at multiple events, that's when they start recognizing you. That's when you start building that relationship you have with a potential member of your audience. I don't remember the exact number, but it's usually something along the lines of people have to see something 5 to 7 times before they actually engage with it. So if people just see you at one event, you're the new person at whatever convention they're at, they'll notice you, but they'll just usually move on. But if they see you at another show after that, another show after that, that's when they might interact with you. They might be like, hey, I've seen you around. You look familiar. I haven't actually checked out your books. What are you doing? Give me your spiel. And sometimes those people are the ones you will add to your audience. They're the ones who buy your game. They're the ones who buy your book. And when they do that, now they've become fans. Now they're supporting you on social media. Now they're telling their friends and family about you. If something fun happens, they have a good interaction with you. That's a story they're going to tell other people about. They're going to grab your card. They're going to make sure they actually check out what you're doing. And that's a very slow and very long-term gain. But it is not unlikely for you to do a show like this and in the coming weeks see that your online sales have gone up because people saw you at the event. Maybe they didn't have the money right then, or maybe they just weren't really sure what they were going to do with your book. But they go back and they check it out later and they decide, I should have bought that while I was at the show. I'll get it now. Or maybe they're people who only buy digital, which is really hard to sell in person, so they get home and they get an e-copy of your game, your book, etc. That is also a reason to do a convention, but mostly it's you need to gather momentum. And that's really difficult when you go in looking at the costs and thinking to yourself, those aren't important. I'm going to make those back and make profit. Because as I've said to multiple people, like, doing conventions is hard. But if I was walking away every convention I did with enough money to pay my rent that month, I'd be doing one convention a month. No question. At least one a month. That would be my job. That's all I'd be doing. Especially because I'm fairly close to Chicago. There's events happening all the time. I would be doing them all the time. I would be the most annoying ever-present face at those events. The fact that I have to parcel out which ones I can go to, which ones I can afford, and I have to try and judge which ones will and won't work, should tell you that that's not the case, because anyone who's making money hand over fist at something, they're not going to stop doing it until they're forced to. So again, I'm not telling people out there, if you're a creator, don't go to conventions, it's not worth it. What I am saying is, think about your approach, actually list out the costs you're going to have to deal with, and ask yourself, looking at those costs, do you feel confident that you can move enough of your product, whatever it is you're bringing, to make back those costs and make a profit? Because if the answer is no, it's sort of like going into a casino. You have people who are throwing money on the table, hoping to win, needing to win. Whereas the actual advice for anyone who's going to gamble is, look at the money you're about to put on the table. If you lose that, what happens? Because if you can just eat that cost and move about your day, no problem, oh well, I shot my shot, that's fine. Give it a shot. Go for it. Do your best, maybe it'll work out for you. But if that is money you need for other things, that is money you cannot afford to lose, do not wager it like this. Because 9 times out of 10, the house is going to win. The only person who's going to walk away with a profit is whoever was hosting the event. And even then, the organizations that run these things are usually moving on shoestrings, so very few of us are actually making any kind of profit for these events. And that's just something I wanted to put out there today, because I have run into so many people who, whenever I get back from an event, are always talking about, like, it's like, oh, well, it wasn't fun, but at least you made money, right? And then I have to do my best to bite my tongue and explain to them, no, I did not make any money this time. Just like I didn't make any money last time, just like I didn't make any money the time before that. Because that's the level I move at, and that's the shows I attend. I could sell everything I bring to some of these events, and I would just barely break even. Or it would give me enough money that I could finally get a bigger amount of stuff to bring. But I don't get to keep that money. It would have to be reinvested, and it would have to start all over again. So, if you are thinking about doing a convention, look into it, but be honest with yourself. Be honest with what the numbers you need are and what you feel confident you can do. And if you're going to start small. I've said this before in previous episodes, but do not go to Gen Con as your first event and hope to make it big. It's not going to happen. Talk to your local library, talk to your local farmer's market, talk to other smaller events that happen in your area. Get a feel for it. Do some low stakes events, see whether or not this is the kind of atmosphere you thrive on, if this is something that you're really engaged with, if you feel you could do, and then start stepping it up into bigger events. Usually there's weekend sci-fi cons, weekend fantasy cons, weekend gaming cons, and get some idea of what your profits are going to be like, if you're going to have any, and what you can afford to do in terms of time, energy, money, whether you can get people to come with you to help. All of those things matter, and they will change the end result of your math. So, I just didn't want anyone going into this thinking this was an easy way to make money and become a famous writer, famous game designer, etc. Because if it was, oh boy, you would all know my name and your shelves would be full of my stuff by now. But that's all for this week's episode of Tabletop Mercenary. If you have more questions on the publishing industry, if you have more questions on designing and publishing RPGs, or if you just have some questions about what are the do's and don'ts of running a convention, or working a convention, I should say, leave those in the comments below. I will answer them to the best of my ability, and if there's some really good ones, it might spark a whole new video. But till next time, it's your Tabletop Mercenary, signing off. First and foremost, thank you for staying to the end of this episode of Tabletop Mercenary. If there's a question you have about being an RPG creator, please don't hesitate to put it in the comments below so I can address it in a future episode. If you want to help me keep the lights on and keep this show going, then please consider subscribing to the channel, liking the video, and giving it a share on your own social media pages to help boost the signal. Lastly, if you really enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a tip by buying me a Ko-fi or becoming a Patreon patron at the links in the video description below. You'll find me on both sites under the name The Literary Mercenary.